All right, we're live. How are you?
Great. How you doing?
Good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. It's going to be a little bit different for us today. Again, my right hand, Greta Russo, is away again, but the show, as we said, is going to keep going forward. Today we have a current guest for us because we just love her and we love all the information that she shares about zoo animal transportation. So Miss Rochelle Watkins Rogers will be with us. Before we get started, I'm Dr. Nelva Bryant. I'm a veterinarian. I work in the airline industry. I work with Delta Airlines, and I was brought on staff to help review and revise the policies for animal transportation. I really enjoy that role, and with it, I actually started learning some things as far as animal transportation, some needs, basically. I started When Pets Fly to kind of share pet travel education with pet owners. And we started these Facebook Lives. We've got a website. Hold on, let me see if I can give some information if you want to follow me. I have a website and other ways you can reach me in reference to getting pet travel education. But as I said, we started doing the Facebook Live events to share information initially with just pet owners, we thought, on pet travel education, but it expanded. We decided to start inviting other stakeholders in the animal transportation industry and start sharing information and actually learning commonalities, because after talking to Rochelle, we learned that zoo animal transportation has a lot of similarities to when you're transporting your pets, as far as getting a proper shipping container for them, getting them acclimated to being transported. Just the whole process is very similar, and actually it's probably even more tedious because now you have animals that are you have different animals, different zoo animals. So Michelle, I believe you've probably transported numerous animals over the years and everything. But let me stop for a second, introduce yourself, and we can start a good conversation here today. So
okay.
Go ahead.
So my name's Rochelle Watkins Rogers. I am a third generation animal person and second generation zookeeper. And I have worked in zoos for over 53 years. I was a zookeeper for like 30 years of that time. And then I worked in the office the last 20 years of my career as a registrar and did the permits and the transaction paperwork, so all the legal paperwork that goes along with moving an animal. So I did coordinate trainings for people about how to do the paperwork, because we were also a government entity at the zoo in Miami that I worked at. And so we had to follow certain procedures according to the municipality that oversaw the zoo operation. So with private people, it's different. You're the owner of the animal, and there are private zoos too. There are nonprofit zoos. So each one of those has different types of paperwork. And that was what I was responsible for maintaining or creating. So now I'm retired. Yeah.
I mean, it's important to know. I'm glad you're sharing that. Folks don't realize the differences there as far as your personal pet and zoo animals. So this is very good information you're sharing. But go ahead now, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say I retired in 2021. And since then, just so I don't get bored, I've been doing pro bono consulting for the animal shipping community. And I still work with different organizations that are responsible for professionalism in zoological operations, and also government agencies. I still have a network of people that I work with because sometimes I have a question that I want to get the right answer to instead of somebody's rumor mill of what they think the real answer is.
Oh yeah, definitely. And Rochelle and I, we've known each other now for at least 3 years, right? At least.
It was before COVID.
It was before COVID. You're right. It was before COVID. I believe I reached out to learn more information about zoo animal transportation. There was an animal transportation course given by AZA, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and reached out regarding that, and we connected. I think I wanted the training, but then I became a part of the panel because I had something to share different too. But Rochelle, at the time, I believe were you the coordinator over that, or tell me.
So at the
your
time, I was still the course administrator. That's for the AZA Animal Transport course. And then I transitioned into just being an instructor so that I could then transition off as an instructor to allow other people. I had been involved with that course since 2012. And, you know, other people need to get a chance to do things like that too. And there are a lot of good people out there that would benefit from people that share their experience or help to teach people. So it's always a good thing to provide service, you know, to your community. It's like volunteerism in a way, because we don't get paid for doing it. It's all on our own time. And, you know, sometimes we'll get a reimbursement for things, but it's all has to do with just giving back to the community.
No, all I can say is the course was very well done. I always applaud you, Rochelle, because you did such a great job at as far as getting all the different for our event, the panelists together, and how we may have had a short, like say 5 to 8 minute presentation, but it was so well done on how you just pulled everybody together. So it's amazing to be a part of that panel. So thank you for having me on that panel. I appreciate it.
Well, you have a part in it. You're one of our partners in transport from the standpoint of not only being a veterinarian, because you look at things a different way, but also because of your involvement with Delta Airlines and, you know, just the exchange of communication between stakeholders is always very helpful to make sure that everybody understands each other's part in the process.
Yeah, it's not as simple as everyone. Like I said, if you think it's complicated, well, if you think it's a little bit tedious to transport a pet, imagine transporting meerkats or mongoose, elephant, which I'm sure you've come close to doing, or chimpanzee. Imagine the details that go into that. So I think it's important that there is a relationship with the airline and the zoos in reference to transporting zoo animals for for conservation purposes, number one, and to ensure that we're like a team. It's teamwork.
Right.
It's teamwork effort.
Right.
This happen.
Yeah, that's something, you know, I always say your contacts and the people that are your partners in whatever you're doing, it's like a marriage. You can't maintain that relationship without putting a little effort into it. You know, check in once a year, have them out maybe a couple of times a year to see the animals that they're shipping. You know, it's always good for their staff too, to kind of feel like they're getting extra behind the scenes look at things, so that they think of things a little bit more differently when you send an animal to their airport.
Right. I think so too. So now tell me, let's switch subject a little bit. Tell me, as far as a zoological consult, what's been going on? What have you been doing these past few months with all the hurricanes and the flooding? What's been going on with that? Tell me.
Well, I'm very lucky to have communication with and work with an organization called ZDR3, Zoo Disaster Rescue and Recovery. And that organization goes out and helps zoological facilities. It's not that they won't help a horse farm, but their focus is the bears and the tigers. You know, I mean, it's like the animals that nobody else can help you. It's got to be somebody that is an animal person that works with that species. And their teams are comprised of people in participating zoos. So somebody might fly from Pennsylvania, somebody else might fly from California, somebody might drive within the state of Florida from one county to another, and it's all volunteer help, and then they support the mission by covering certain costs. And so my way of giving, I don't have money, so I host some of their first responders at my home. So it gives them a base camp. Sometimes they're driving a couple of hours back and forth to the facilities they're working at. Sometimes it's just a day trip to go check a place out. And so what I can do for them is I can go online and check out, what hotels are available, because even something like finding a hotel for your staff after an event like that can be difficult because the local people don't have a home either. And some of them are pet friendly hotels, so they're probably booked up. And first responders have contracts with hotels. So when those electrical trucks come in from out of state, they've got blocks of hotels or staging areas where they've got like maybe mobile homes that the guys live in, and they have a male camp and a woman's camp, I think last time I saw. But it's very involved even just to have the people there. So by me giving them a home base, it makes it a lot easier for them to make decisions or quick plans, and less impact to the budget, because it is a nonprofit.
Yeah, a lot's been going on with it. So tell me, well, share a little bit of because you're from Florida, so you can give us more of an insight of what's been going on, because I think more we hear in the news, we hear more about just as far as pets, of course, but again, behind the scenes, there's a lot of activities with zoos and rescuing them, or either rescuing or sheltering in place and everything regarding
exactly that. And one of the first things that people have to know and understand is the difference between the FEMA flood zone map, which is for insurance, and I'm assuming property valuation, but your evacuation zones are the zones that your local municipality have deemed when you are in a certain color neighborhood, red, orange, green, yellow. They make them different colors, and you see a map and you see where your address is. So if they say A and B, that if you live in those zones, you don't have any choice. You have to evacuate. I mean, you can stay there, but if 15-foot storm surge comes in, you're going to be in trouble. And trying to rescue people in the middle of a hurricane is impossible. After a certain amount of wind and flooding, they have to stop because they can't put their responders at risk. Right. So that's why people, don't take it serious. That, like you said, people think, oh, transport is easy. I just throw the animal in the car. Well, when something's going on like that, you may not even have control of your pet. For sure, the zoo people know they can't just put a leash and collar on the tiger and walk him in the crate. It's a whole procedure of anesthesia and all of that stuff. And so, or training is the preferred method. If you have people that are good at training at your facility to train the animal to go into the crate, then you don't have to deal with giving them any anesthesia. But that, just crating the animal, you need a plan for that. But when you're a pet animal owner, people think they don't need a plan for that. Well, what if that one time your dog has always been good about going, you throw the treat in the crate and they run in and you close the door and he licks your fingers. But there's a hurricane going on right now, and you have a 3-hour window to get out. And if the dog doesn't want to go in the crate, what are you going to do? That's the kind of way people need to think about simple things like crating an animal for transport. And what kind of because they're also, and the animals in the zoo do the same thing with their keepers. They are sort of emotionally in tune to if the zookeeper's mad, happy, upset, depending on the species, they even respond. If you're crying, that maybe a snake might not, but an orangutan might react to that. Right. I've had orangutans I worked with respond to that by trying to make me laugh, doing goofy stuff and looking at me to see if I stop crying. But you got to know your animal, and you got to have a backup plan, and think it all the way through. Food. Is the animal on medication? Do you need to order the medication before there might not be a prescription facility, or maybe the local pharmacy gets destroyed, and you have to make different plans about getting your prescription filled, or maybe the vet's office got destroyed and they're working out of a different office, different place. That's happened here this year with schools that have there's a Catholic school that closed down. They're not going to open up. They're not going to rebuild. And there's other parishes that have taken the children from that school because it was totally destroyed and they didn't have the money to fix it. So if the more prepared you are, the more you can avoid, physical harm, and you have better safety and, nutrition for your animal. They got to be eating their normal diet, and then you need to be monitoring their behavior. Are they still eating their food properly? What's coming out on the other end? Does that look normal?
Right.
And the frequency, consistency, is there blood in it? So those are all important things. And sometimes an animal can have something. That's why we do a pre-ship exam. We'll do a physical exam and testing. Some of it is required by the entry, either state or country. Right. And some of it is required by the facility getting the animal. And some of it is just the institution's normal policy for that species. And then the animal gets immobilized, or if you can collect samples and do it without immobilization, that's preferred. But it's a long process of, then you have to interpret the test results. Sometimes it's a species where there isn't a lot known about the parasite you're looking at, or the bacteria or virus, because they have exotic animals that carry exotic illnesses,
Right. It's really detailed. A lot of folks don't realize that as far as the zoo animal setting, there's some species can't be around other species, but depending on the different intestinal parasites that they may have. So you don't want them commingling. So there's important reason why you keep them separate. And there's a lot of details folks don't understand regarding that with zoo animals and everything. But let's see. Question for you. How should they prepare for, preparing for a rescue is difficult. I would imagine preparing for any type of emergency situation, you can't do it then. This is something like months in advance. I'm sure they've efforts are done well beyond before these hurricane seasons and stuff like that, as far as preparing, correct?
Right. So within the institution, you have your management leadership that comes up. It's sort of like a tiny government. They come up with policies, rules, the mission of the institution. Then that trickles down to the frontline leadership and departmental leadership, and they come up with how they're going to respond to those things. If you're in a municipal umbrella of leadership, then whatever entity is above you may have protocols and policies that you have to follow, whether you want to or not, but you can add to them things that are unique to your institution. So for a zoo, if they're in a parks and recreation, they're not like a basketball court or a baseball diamond, or or a golf course. They have live animals. They have specialized facilities that are regulated by the government, and how you transport those animals is also regulated by the government. So you have to know what you can and can't do, and what you have to ask for permission to do in an emergency. Sometimes you have to make a decision based on the health and safety of the animal and the people, not only in the institution, but in the surrounding neighborhoods of your facility. And so that's why when it comes to dangerous animal transport, like elephants, tigers, anything that can kill you or hurt you really bad, that maybe you wish you were dead because it hurts so much, those kinds of animals have to be integrated into the plans of the first responders. So like police, fire department, Fish and Wildlife, those people are the ones that can make things happen quickly for you if they understand the need. And if you include them in your planning process, then you're going to have sound decision-making tools that you can put in a toolkit and take out when you need them. So, and that's from everything from any kind of authority to move an animal when you might need a permit. Sometimes those things can be waived in an extreme situation, but you have to mitigate that situation with the agency that is involved, just like in-cabin transport with an animal with an airline. You have to negotiate that with them, what kind of animal it is, how you want to do it, what kind of container is it in, what's the percentage of ventilation, airflow, all of those things. Same as like with a zoo animal, but could be more delicate than a cat or a dog. When you're talking about small things like insects or hummingbirds, there's specialized crates. You're normally not allowed to feed an animal in transit, but an animal like a hummingbird, if they don't eat while they're being transported, they have such a high metabolism, they could die before they reach the destination if it's a long flight. And there has to be a light in the crate that they can see where the food is. And, it's also like animal prep for a transport like that might be you put the container in the bird's cage just to see if they're even using the feeders and kind of introduce them to the feeders in the container before they get shipped. That goes a long way to giving that animal the best possible way to adapt to the transport.
It's amazing though. Like I said, it's for an emergency. I would imagine, again, you've got all these contingency plans already, something set in motion for a particular animal species, because it's not going to be same for, as you said before, for a tiger or an elephant, hummingbird. There's going to be variations based upon the species, but I'm sure within a
and by state too. It could be the same species, and each state has a different law or rule. Some states, and I've encountered that when in logistics planning for imports, where the port of entry was a large distance from where the destination was, and each state that land transport had to go through, some of them wanted to do a police escort. And sometimes if you have a high profile animal, it's not a good idea to have all, then people are like, oh, and it gets out of that state and maybe they're following you and they're like, what's in there? So, you can request, can you please make them undercover cars? We prefer to be low profile. And I've had them agree to that, because they understand the need if it's not something all the states are requiring.
Right. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize that you bringing up the fact that there's different state variations. Just I'm bringing this up for our pet owners to know too. Realize when we're traveling in the continental U.S., it might be different. But if you're going to Hawaii, which is part of the U.S., but it's not within the continental U.S., if you go to Hawaii, Guam, or other U.S. territories, the regulatory requirements will be different. So don't think that maybe a normal
Puerto Rico, because also their health regulations can be different. An island country that's never had rabies, your animal has to be negative for 6 months prior to shipment, and
tighter.
Or else they won't accept it. That's why in the UK, they have such wonderful reception centers, because there's a long quarantine period for certain types of illnesses. So your dog might be at the airport quarantine for 6 months before you get to take them home. So, it's a very time-consuming planning process, similar to that would be for a dog going to the UK.
Yes, a definite. So this again, for pet owners not aware, there are regulatory requirements based upon that, your destination. So don't think you can just pet, even though, you know, the human animal bond is so strong. A lot of times, I mean, I feel like my dogs, you know, they're mine. They're my pets, but they're mine. You know, you humanize them, good or bad, but we humanize them. You have to realize they are animals, and there are regulatory requirements when you transport them, and you have to make it met. If you have to meet those requirements, and if not, you can be denied entry, and that can set up a motion of a lot of things that you wouldn't want, that your pet's going to experience in the process. It could be quarantining, could be now shipped somewhere and back to the U.S. So that's stress for you and your pet going back. Worst case scenario, I don't think it's ever happened, but it's always threatened, humane euthanasia. I don't think, well, they threaten it, but you need to get moving so it doesn't happen, basically. So, but you have to realize there are regulatory requirements for transporting pets, zoo animals, any animal, basically. It could be live tropical fish. There are regulatory requirements for transporting them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there's also a pre-flight checklist that's filled out. And on there are some places where comments can be made. So maybe if they're concerned about humane euthanasia, they might want to say, please notify me, I'll have my vet do it. Or, you know, if it's feasible that they're going to be in the same area or something, or if it's a specialized species, you know, the airline may defer to a specialty vet in that area, depending on what it is. You know, I mean, a gorilla or an elephant, I can imagine it, or a whale is like one of the worst case scenarios, because that is so different than what they typically transport, that they might not have available a veterinarian for that, you know. And sometimes with some of those species, even I know personally from several that I've been around and had to do the records for, of an elephant necropsy can take days. So you even have to have storage capability, or a place that is not exposed to the sun, and you know, and sometimes you just don't have that. So then what do you got to do? Okay, we got to put up a tent, everybody. Yeah. You know, we got to get this tent up, we got to put something down on the ground so that, you know, we can do this properly.
I remember that happening many years ago at Cornell University. I remember an elephant being necropsied, and a lot of efforts were taken because it couldn't come inside the building. It don't have the space. Right. Didn't even have a table that can accommodate the weight. So right. Yeah,
and a lot of times, you know, veterinarians that are colleagues of the vet that has the animal, they'll call upon them to help, and they'll come and volunteer to expedite the necropsy, because then if you got more veterinarians there, you can do things a lot quicker, as long as they all know the game plan and what samples need to be collected, and you've got all the materials to do it with. Then, you know, that's more or less them just doing their job that they normally do. So it helps.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And people sometimes don't want to talk about that. Like, I'll have clients that, you know, we're making a plan for something, and I'll say, okay, what are you going to do if the animal escapes or dies? Because even carcass disposal, if you're talking about a dog and you're talking about an elephant, or a non-human primate that has zoonotic diseases, there's a lot of PPE required. There's a facility that's needed, and you know, who's gonna have that thought about if you didn't discuss it but when you were making your plans? So it's sort of a necessary evil, because, and usually I'll talk to the veterinarians if they're part of the planning team with me, because they can explain it to the client easier than I can. I'll explain to them why we need it, but they're not going to be like responding the same as they would if the veterinarian says, we only have so many hours to collect the tissue samples and the blood, and we need to have a facility where we can do, you know, I mean, they will talk to them in a medical professional way that really outlines the need. So that, because you can't force the owners to comply. You can tell them that this is a good idea to have something instead of scrambling at the last minute. And most of them are good about it, but some, until they understand the need, sometimes you have to outline the situation and best and worst case scenarios so they can roll it in their mind.
Look, that's contingency planning, right? I mean,
it's not easy.
Really trying to think of all the different things, and sometimes there's things that come up that you didn't even realize or recognize that, oh, I need to address that situation too.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the non-human primates, you can't just, I mean, actually any animal in general, you can't just dispose of them. I mean, you have to think about how you dispose of them and the potential of exposing other animals, say if it digs it up, and there's a lot to consider.
Contamination, even like for the zoonotic diseases, contamination of the carcass and the people that are handling the carcass, if you don't know what that animal died from. So it needs to have a plan, and it needs to be something that a veterinarian helps them out with, because they're going to be the expert that knows how expeditiously you need to do certain things.
Oh yeah. Look, as you said earlier, PPE, private personal protective equipment, protecting yourself if you're doing any cropsy, extremely important, because you don't know what you're going to expose yourself to potentially as well in that process. So there's a lot of details, transporting and just everything you're doing, it has to be done. Now, question for you though, just going out of emergencies and stuff, I'll try to get onto this question here. If a zoo or aquarium is planning for animal shipment, would it be different if it's fall, winter, or summer, spring? What's going to be different? Tell me what would be different if they're planning if it's for cooler weather.
So what would be different? One is you have to black out holidays, the day before and after a weekend, and then you have to pay attention to the temperatures and weather conditions. So when you look at your calendar, the months of fall and spring, and black out those days that you can't use, you have a lot fewer days that you can use.
Think about it. Think about it, you do. You have less time. Right.
You've lost maybe a month or so, you've lost a lot of days. I haven't actually counted it out if you do it, but you've lost a lot of days, because you don't want to plan a transport by air to be on before a weekend or right after a weekend, because the air traffic is different and also the staffing is different. But then if it's a holiday, that on top of it is another red flag to stay away from, because that's an easy way for crates to get lost or put on the wrong plane or forgotten where it is. I mean, because they're handling so much luggage. And also you think about during the holidays, especially in the fall and winter, which you'd stay away from winter unless you're in a tropical area like Florida and it's a local transport, that you could still do. But if you're transporting to New York or to, the desert, they have blizzards sometimes, even though it's the desert. And the conditions at the beginning and the end of the flight are what are the important things. And sometimes you got a little window of days or a week, but it's a constant updating that you have to do. That's why it pays off to train people and have a backup person. So if somebody is off on vacation, out sick, or on a day off, and somebody needs to check things, that they've trained somebody to help them, assist them do that. What's the temperature today? We're waiting for it to be 48. When it's 48 and above, we can do this, no rain, no snow, So if somebody's checking every day, then you're more nimble. Your plans can be expedited because you already know the parameters of your plan.
Right. Yeah, it makes it difficult. And also, as I said earlier, working closely with an airline, your airline of choice as far as those things, and just keep them in the loop with it.
And by virtue of it being cool weather, that's much safer than heat. If an animal's getting stressed out and their body temperature is getting higher and it's a cold weather shipment that normally you wouldn't do during the cold weather, but you have to do this one, then the animal's, going to be insulating itself in its crate. But there is a certain point where it's still going to run into a problem of the core body temperature of the animal. And that has to do with the air circulation. And that could be affected by what kind of bedding you use, and whether the animal's crate is put in the right place in between being loaded and waiting and unloaded and waiting. There's things that need to be outlined, and that crate label that's put on, there needs to be specific instructions with details of, whether to avoid smoke, fumes, especially with animals like birds. A bird has different kinds of lungs. If they inhale that stuff, it just kills them.
Right.
It's deadly. Even like your nonstick pan in the house, if you got a pet bird, the fumes from that can kill your bird. So if it's being transported and the holding room, like there's a lot of vehicle traffic, that's not good for the bird.
Yeah, no, they should have a live animal holding room that's temperature controlled and away from everything else. No exposures. I mean, it should be an actual room.
I wish we had more animal centers at major airports.
Don't get me started on that topic.
I know, right?
Don't get me started on the topic. That's a strong one, and we're actually hopefully after. Well, we've had Beth Schuette from the ARC at JFK talk about having that facility on airport grounds. Next year, we're going to have some folks from it's called HARC. It's Heathrow Animal Receiving Center, I believe, but HARC. We're going to have someone talking about their animal facility on airport grounds over in London Heathrow.
I think they call it the reception center because
it is reception. Thank you. It is reception center.
Tristan was the manager of that for a long time.
Yes. We're going to have Susie. Oh gosh, I forgot her last name right now. But we're going to have them come on and talk about that center, how important it is. That's also
an amazing facility. I love that place.
On airport grounds in the U.S. The ARC is wonderful, but it would be outstanding if we had one in Atlanta, just the major locations where animals transfer through. And Atlanta is a big spot where animals transfer through or travel through the United States. So this would be a good location, maybe LAX. Who knows, Miami?
Yeah, I mean, even if they did the ports of entry, that would be huge because a lot of exotic animals are coming through those ports. If it's not a port of entry, you can't import an animal unless you get a designated port exemption permit, which is another permit that you have to get. And you have to get it with Fish and Wildlife and USDA, depending on the species, if they're regulated, as endangered or threatened, and also for the wildlife inspection for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Miami would be great because isn't that a spot for a lot of birds coming into the country?
Yeah, fish, birds. There's a lot of smaller wildlife coming in, reptiles, snakes, a lot of pet trade animals because it's also, it's located by the ocean. So not only they get air shipments, there's boats that come in with stuff too. Not all the animals are for exhibit purposes or pet purposes. There's also animals that are shipped, which are food animals. So, but they still need to be by law transported humanely. So even if it's a normal shipment of food animals, if they're not being transported humanely, they can be confiscated, by the agencies that do the inspections.
Right. We can get, it would be wonderful if we can get this different federal agencies to be involved with something like that. As you're saying, Fish and Wildlife Services, USDA, veterinary services, and then, animal welfare as far as make sure the welfare of the animals. CDC would be great too for them coming in, various animals coming under CDC's regulations. It would be so nice if we can get all the federal agencies to work together and develop.
Well, and with USDA, I know this is true in the bird community. I don't know how much of it is done with other species, but USDA can approve a quarantine facility for an animal to go through their USDA quarantine when they're imported at a private facility instead of their facility if it meets the requirements of the quarantine, biological barriers, sanitizing agents, treatments that are done to the animal, like with, rhinos and elephants, there's a tick spray they have to put on them. There's different things that have to be done with the animals. So it has to be at a facility that's specialized for that. And basically, zoos that are importing elephants typically get their facility a different area that's separated from the others animals. The tools are separate so that they can quarantine them there, because it's a big deal to move an elephant. And you won't want to keep moving it and moving it and moving it once you've gotten it there, but it's very costly. They have to inspect. You have to follow this questionnaire that the veterinarians have for you about the process and protocols. And then they take pictures, and then you have to explain what the animal's going to do. So, the animal, when it's coming in, may have trainers coming with it that can get the animal to do what they need to do until it adapts to the new facility and new people. And so, it's like the elephant has to open his ears so they can spray behind his ears and lay down and roll over. And so it's a lot of, you can't, like with a dog, pick up their tail and spray, you can't.
Not as simple with an elephant. No. Yeah,
but you can also get with smaller animals, and depending on how long the transport is, whether it's land or air, or courier service, there's things you can put in the crate, like a lot of reptile crates. They don't need as much air circulation as like a mammal does. And so they have styrofoam with the holes. They have to be a certain diameter, but the holes go through the styrofoam to the outside. And then you can put like a heat pack in there. There's certain types of heat packs that are allowed to be put in the crate, or maybe a hot water bottle, if it's a short transport. But those are things that you can do to make the crate more comfortable for the animal if it's cool out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's always easier to put a coat on or something coat on when it's hot. It's hot,
I know.
I can't do anything about it. But yeah, I'm sure, I'd imagine the best season to transport is not say season, but the cooler months is best for transporting.
Yeah, so spring and fall are the times that usually they try and avoid summer and winter.
Mm-hmm.
So spring and fall are your shipping windows at the beginning of the season and the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially if you're doing an international transport, you have to think of it in terms of 6-month blocks of time, because the federal permits only last 6 months. And then if you've done pre-ship and then there's a delay, the veterinarian has to worry about how old is the health certificate,
mm-hmm.
and can it still be used, or do they need to do another pre-ship? Maybe the pre-ship doesn't have to be as extensive, but they might have to collect some samples to renew the health certificate.
Wow. There's a lot to consider. Definitely a lot to consider.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about getting some pets ready, though. Let's what will you do to get them acclimated? I mean, again, it's going to vary, like you said before. It's going to vary by the animal species.
Exactly. So, like, if it's a reptile and they have a breeding season, first, if you're shipping a female, you have to decide and check out if the animal's gravid, and if it's gravid, how far along is it? She can't be shipped if she's pregnant. And so I was involved with this one transport planning that was being done for iguanas, large iguanas. And some of the institutions were only shipping males and some were only shipping females. So the ones that were shipping males were more free to plan whatever time of the year that they wanted to ship the animals. But the ones that were shipping females could only ship during a certain time of the year. So all of your planning has, and if their birthing season and gestation or pregnancy season is spring, you only have fall every year. Unless you get some weather that's what you need to ship the animals.
Well,
so
that's interesting, though, Rochelle, because I saw that, at least for mammals, they always say during the third trimester, it's not ideal to transport them during the third trimester. But for reptiles, you're saying being pregnant in general is...
Depending on the species. So I just know that was the case with the iguanas, they were Jamaican iguanas. But, there's also life, like if you're shipping invertebrates, they go through instar cycles of their life, and their most impressive time of their life is also the end of their life, when they usually breed and then die. So like a butterfly or a beetle, they're only gonna live so long, and you can tell by what stage in life they are how long they're gonna live. So they're delicate as far as humidity and temperature. Maybe not as much airflow as the humidity and temperature. Like they might be able to be in a box that has minimal air holes, as long as they're not like hot and wet, because then it cooks them, and they get into distress. And then, when they get to their destination, they don't live long after that. So you might be able to show them alive at a certain life stage, but maybe because the shipment was delayed and they were in the container too long, they might not be there past their quarantine period. So it's really the timing of things for certain species is critical sometimes.
Oh yeah, definitely. Wow. So tell me, you say, what did you do for getting an elephant ready for transport? How would you acclimate an elephant?
Well, luckily, he was from a country that was, he was from Melbourne, Australia, and he was going to Florida, which was kind of close to the same, it's not like it was North Pole and South Pole, but he was in the range of the temperatures when he got shipped. Sometimes with other animals, you might need to ship them in the spring at a hot climate so they can acclimate before the summer. But if it's a cold climate animal, you want to ship them in the fall so they can acclimate to the heat when it comes,
Okay.
So you have to pick the opposite time of the year, whether it's cooler from winter or cooler from getting warmer.
Right.
So because the hours of light and day too trigger different biological functions in their body that'll there's animals that hibernate. I've never had to work with a transport for a species like that, but I'm sure that has to be taken into consideration. Is the animal in hibernation and we have to wait, because you might kill it if you ship it during, or it could be the best time to ship them.
Right. You made me think of something funny for a second, just because it's talking about animals and the different features of animals. Know of a shipment where there were opossums, and they made it to their destination, and the comment was made that they thought they were dead upon arrival. And so I'm like researching what happened. No, they were playing possum.
Oh God.
So we have to remember the normal behavior of animals too.
Yeah. There's a reason there's a saying called playing possum.
Yeah, but I was so nervous. I was like, wait a minute, what happened? There's no evidence of damage to the crate. There was no damage, nothing. What happened? Oh, we found out it was playing possum.
No blood, no blood.
No. So, yeah, so some things you have to consider with again, the various animals and their nature, hibernation, or just different things about these animals when they're being transported. You just have to remember those behaviors.
Yeah, and like if it's a bird of prey, they have to have a perch. Mm-hmm. A lot of arboreal animals. Arboreal animals. Maybe it has to be a perch up. Or some animals you can just do a shelf. It doesn't have to be a perch, and it has to be secured in the shipping container so that it's not going to come loose and injure the animal or cause any breakage to the shipping container.
Yeah. When you're going back to perches, a lot of folks don't realize birds that normally perch, that's how they kind of get their balance. So during transport, it could be a parakeet. They need a perch. Right. They've got to have their balance, and it has to be a certain diameter. You can't get where they can't grab it. They really have to hook onto it. It's almost like I look at it as almost like their little safety seatbelt for them, because that's how they
like if they're in a tree and the wind's blowing the branch, they got to be able to hang on. So like even the surface of the item that you have in there, whether it's a post or a perch, sometimes they'll put padding on that, like carpeting, indoor outdoor carpeting, or some kind of rough material, so that they can hang on to it. Because if it's slippery, it's not going to do them any good. They're going to be sliding all over. So it's got to have like some kind of rough edge on it. Not that it's going to injure the animal, but to give it some gripping power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all these things you have to consider with them and everything. You know what? I learned something new fairly recently too. Meerkat, like certain animals, if you take them out of their group setting and then put them back for whatever reason, they have to go through another pecking order again. So there's a risk behind that. So there's so many things to consider with different wildlife.
Even Cuban Amazon parrots. I used to be the stud bookkeeper for Cuban Amazon parrots, and we had a facility that did that. They had to bring their birds in because they were doing a hurricane prep, and they didn't put them in the same crate because just like for a shipment, sometimes animals can't go together because they get scared and they might attack each other. So they had them right next to each other. And then the next day they put them together back in the exhibit, and they attacked each other like they didn't know who each other was. I mean,
right. Things to consider when you're transporting, and it's different. Well, you know what? That even goes to I think about people with their pets. They think that my dog and cat get along very well at home. Can we put them in the same? Or it could be either two dogs or two cats, or a dog and a cat. They say they get along very well at home. Can they go in the same shipping container? No, because this is a stressful environment. As far as the process itself is stressful, and they can very well attack each other. Someone's going to attack each other and stuff. So it's best to keep them separate. I mean, they might be bonded, but let's keep them separate during transport.
And, they also need to understand if they're shipping that animal on an aircraft, they have to follow the IATA requirements. And if the IATA requirements don't allow for felines and canines to be shipped in the same container, they have to have two crates.
Right. Yeah, folks don't realize that. I'm doing my best to keep sharing as much as possible, but it's folks need to realize that, and just more, the more we talk about it, the better it's going to come out there, basically.
I
But
hope so. Yeah, I know there's a lot to learn and it's overwhelming, but
yes,
anytime that somebody has a question, if they have a reference they can use to look up an answer, they should do it, because it's almost like learning a different language. The more you practice and look things up, the more you're going to retain.
definitely. So, I don't know if you noticed the time, but we have, as always, we go on, and it goes so fast with the
Well, we never
discussions.
have to worry about being too short.
No, it's never too short. We have such a blast, and it's such great conversation. Anything else you could think additionally for zoo animal transport in general, or animal transportation in all?
I would like to make a recommendation to people that have animals, not just dogs and cats, but we also saw with the devastation this year, especially in North Carolina, because of the mountain environment. Those people had to make more rigorous plans to get help and to help people. So they were using goats, donkeys, horses, ponies to lug materials and equipment and food up these hills, mountains, sorry, not hills. And so if somebody's making a plan for a farm, there was this one guy that was telling a story about they could only move so quickly and so fast, and they had to leave a pig and some ducks behind. And then the next day after they could get there, they made the trip to find the animals, and the animals all figured out where to go. But you really need to have something in mind, no matter how simple and small of an animal you have. Like, you can have a little parakeet, and just pay attention to these stories you hear about when there's a disaster or there's a flight thing, that happens. What do they do with the animal? How is that handled? So that you can better plan your animal transport for your pet.
I think so too. Again, it's a disaster. You hate to plan for it. I mean, worst case, it's planning for the worst case scenario. You think you don't have to plan for it. But
yeah, I wish I didn't think that way either. But when I was a zookeeper, I would walk into the back of some of these dangerous animal exhibits, and the first thing I would think about before I open the door, if something goes wrong, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Well, that thought process has carried on to now permitting, contingency plans, building a crate. What are you going to do if this happens? How are you going to get the water in? How are you going to put the food in? How are you going to keep it from tipping over? And a friend of mine put a solar fan on the top of hoofstock crates. And when it got out in the sun, it circulated the air because it turned that fan on. So there's so many things that people could do to be prepared and prepare their animals.
Yeah, we have them. We got to take care of them. So start preparing. That's really, really good. Well, any other, I would say thanks everyone for joining us today. Any further things you want to add? I would say, please contact Rochelle. You do more than just being a zoological consultant. Honestly, your state probably needs you for a lot of events that's going on for disaster preparedness too, with your expertise.
Well, by working with ZDR3, they work with the state officials. Okay. And so, by helping them, I'm part of that team, like an adjunct person. But I in fact, they had to make up a title for me. So I'm the community liaison.
Sounds perfect. I was just saying, really, it's something that's needed for especially any disasters within your state. And there's a lot, I would say, for a state. Florida has a lot of zoos and different environments than
California, Texas, Florida, and to a certain extent, if you compare land size, New Jersey's got a lot of exotic animals up there. Their laws are a little different. So I don't know how that plays into it, but I know that I've heard lots of stories of people having things that they shouldn't have, and buying them online and stuff like that. There's people have to beware, because somebody can sell you something online. It might be legal in their state, but in your state it could be illegal.
Right.
That was a problem with Florida a lot, because things can survive in Florida doesn't mean they're supposed to be here.
Right. And you make me think people should be aware of anything buying online. It's especially if it's an exotic animal. Really do your research, find out your regulatory requirements for in your state, because again, as you just said, some states might allow it, others may not.
Right.
I've gotten emails through work where folks are they're saying that they're trying to get an African gray parrot from some other country here. Be aware that there's certain parrots like the African gray that are actually endangered. So it's not that simple to get it.
Right.
Someone said they're going to sell it to you. There's a lot of regulations that have to be met for you to even have it, because it's endangered. So do your research when you're getting anything, especially an exotic animal online. Do your research.
Yep.
So, and before we go, I want to thank you too. You introduced us to Sarah Walker, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it you?
Yeah.
We had a good session with her.
Wildlife Confiscation Network.
Yeah. She came on and shared a lot of enlightening information in reference to that. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
Definitely.
I'm glad that it worked out well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have you back again. You're going to have you writing articles and do whatever we can in our newsletter in the future. But we definitely appreciate you being here, Rochelle.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And please reach out to her if you have any questions. And that is it for us today. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for joining.
Bye.